My name is Lauren Blake. I used to be the one they called when a deal had to get done across borders, cultures, and time zones. For almost 8 years, I was HelixCore's secret weapon in Asia-Pacific negotiations. Not because I was loud, not because I had some flashy MBA, but because I understood the one thing no one else in the boardroom seemed to grasp. Business isn't just numbers. It's language. It's timing. It's trust. I spent 11 months on the Tokyo deal. 11 months building what they thought could be done with a few executive visits and a polished deck. I moved into a cramped apartment in Shibuya, took meetings at impossible hours, and drank more barley tea than I ever cared to again. I learned how to bow at the right depth and when not to speak. I studied Keigo until it gave me headaches and pushed through because every syllable mattered. And over time, they opened up. The partners, the legal teams, and even the assistants who ran the real power structures. They listened because I listened first. The deal was worth $217 million over 5 years. Joint logistics expansion hybrid tech, sharing data compliance structuring across 4 prefectures. It was HelixCore's entry point into a region they'd only half understood until then. I wasn't just translating language. I was translating culture, pacing, and risk. I became the bridge, and everyone knew it, everyone except Brent Davis. Brent joined HelixCore 5 weeks before the final signing. Silicon Valley pedigree, perfect teeth, one of those overconfident resumes that reads like a venture-backed fairy tale. He shook my hand like he was doing me a favor. Called me a rock star in meetings, which I hated, then ignored everything I said. He didn't ask for a briefing, didn't review the cultural notes, just assumed he could wing it like every other pitch he'd bulldozed before. 2 days before the contract was set to close, we were in a sleek, glass-walled conference room on the 34th floor of a Tokyo tower. The air smelled like dry-cleaned suits and anxiety. The room was silent, the kind of silence you learn to respect in Japan. I had just translated a clause revision and was waiting for a reply from the lead negotiator when Brent leaned forward in his chair and said something that made my stomach twist. Actually, Lauren's been reassigned. Logistics support internal only. I'll be leading from here on. No one moved, not even the interpreter. It took a full beat before I realized he wasn't joking. Reassigned, internal only. He had erased me mid-sentence, mid-deal, mid-life's work. I looked at him, but he was already flipping a page in his folder like I hadn't just vanished from the conversation. The Japanese team didn't react. They're trained not to. But I saw the flicker. One of the senior legal advisors blinked too quickly. Another adjusted his pen and didn't write anything down. The silence thickened, and Brent mistook it for patience. I didn't say anything. Not then. I nodded once, closed my notebook, slid it into my briefcase. I said in Japanese that I needed to step out for a moment. Brent smiled like I was grabbing coffee. I walked to the hallway, not fast, not storming. Just enough to keep my hands from shaking. I stood at the window overlooking the city I'd come to love. Neon signs flickered against the early dusk. Trains slid between shadows. I let my breath catch up. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I just stared and thought, this is what betrayal looks like in daylight. Neat. Clean. Signed in ink you don't even see coming. The irony was, I knew something like this might happen. Brent wasn't the first man who'd underestimated me. He was just the first one to try and cut me out so publicly. I had seen the signs, the scheduling changes, the off-record meetings, the way he started replying to partners directly without looping me in. He was staging something. I just didn't expect him to do it at the table in front of everyone at the moment I had worked almost a year to reach. That night, I sat alone in my hotel room with a green tea Kit Kat and a half-drunk beer. My phone buzzed with unread messages. Half were from our Tokyo assistant asking if I was okay. The other half was silence in the form of Slack pings that trailed off after the third attempt. No one really knew what to say. I didn't either. I stared at my laptop at the draft folder I'd labeled 6 weeks earlier. Apex East Strategy Founders Materials. It had a pitch deck, a legal shell doc, and a list of 10 companies that had once said to me, if you ever go solo, call us first. I hadn't planned to use it. Not really. I'd started building it as insurance, a just in case. But sitting in that quiet room, watching the Tokyo skyline buzz with life, while my career dissolved into someone else's ambition, I opened the folder again. This time, I didn't close it. By morning, I had booked a meeting with a lawyer in Shinjuku. I didn't tell anyone, not my boss, not my assistant, not even my mentor. Because now, it wasn't about survival. It was about ownership. I wasn't going to ask for my seat back. I was going to build my own table, and I knew exactly who I'd invite to sit across from me. The conference room felt colder than usual. Not cold from air conditioning, but the kind of cold that sinks under your skin when something's about to go wrong. The glass walls, the polished steel, the tidy line of water bottles all shimmered under the fluorescent light like props in a play. I was halfway through translating a revision about supplier timelines. My voice was steady, my posture still. Across from me, the lead negotiator from Shintaro Freight nodded slowly, his pen poised, but not yet writing. This was the moment where silence mattered more than talk. Then Brent leaned forward, adjusted his cuff, and spoke in that casual California tone he thought passed for confidence. Before we go further, I want to clarify leadership on our side. Lauren will be shifting to internal logistics support. Going forward, I'll be leading all external strategy. The words didn't land immediately. They just hovered like static. My mouth was still half open from the last phrase I'd translated. For a second, I honestly thought he'd misspoken. Or maybe I'd misheard. But then I looked at his face. He wasn't looking at me. He was looking down at his notes, already moving on, already finished with whatever version of me he'd needed to complete this illusion of control. The air changed. I could feel it like a drop in pressure before a storm. The Japanese team didn't react with words. They wouldn't. But the signs were there. One executive slowly lowered his pen. Another shifted slightly in his chair, the softest rustle against starched fabric. No one looked directly at me. It was the kind of silence that knew exactly what had just happened and didn't want to embarrass the one being erased. I didn't speak. Not at first. Not even to him. I let the moment stretch. I let the silence do what it was built to do in rooms like this, amplify the insult. Then I turned slightly and addressed the group in Japanese, my voice even soft, almost formal. Please excuse me for a moment. I'll return shortly. I stood slowly, not rushed, not angry, just controlled. The chair made a faint sound against the floor. I gathered my folder with deliberate care as if it still mattered. Then I walked out. The hallway was quiet. Neutral carpet, minimal art. A window at the far end looked out over Tokyo, where the sun had just begun to dip behind the skyline. I walked toward it like I had a reason, though I didn't know what that was yet. My hands were steady now. My heartbeat had slowed. It was like my body had decided not to give Brent the satisfaction of panic. But inside, something had gone hollow. Not broken. Not yet. Just stripped bare. I watched a plane drift across the sky in the distance. I wondered what my face had looked like in that moment, sitting at that table while he announced my professional death like a budget update. I hadn't flinched. I hadn't blinked. But inside, it had burned. Not from shame. From clarity. He had planned this. He waited until it was too late to protest, too public to push back, too delicate a moment for confrontation. He had waited until my entire value was on display to make it disappear. I let out one long breath, slow through my nose, eyes still fixed on the skyline. My reflection in the glass looked calm, composed, unreadable. That's exactly what I wanted. Because if he thought this was the end of the story, he didn't know who he was dealing with. 3 months before Brent cut me out, I had dinner with one of our Japanese partners in a quiet restaurant, tucked behind a train station in Shinagawa. The lighting was low, the food simple, and the sake poured without needing to ask. Somewhere between the grilled fish and the second pour, he leaned in and asked if I had ever considered starting something of my own. I remember laughing, not because it was funny, but because I didn't think anyone had ever said it to me so directly. He told me they'd back me, quietly, no press, no drama, just a clean partnership. He said they trusted me more than my company. At the time, I chalked it up to a compliment. I told him I was loyal to the work, to the challenge. I didn't say yes. I didn't say no either. I just let the idea sit. After that boardroom scene, the idea stopped sitting. It stood up and started walking. Back in my hotel room, the skyline looked different. Not brighter, not darker, just sharper, like someone had wiped the glass clean. I pulled out my laptop, opened the Apex East folder, and reread the list of names. Clients I had built from nothing. Teams I had trained, mentored, and flown out to meet on holidays. People who knew what I could do before anyone else did. It wasn't about revenge. That's too small. It was about direction. About building something that couldn't be taken mid-sentence. I wasn't going to beg for my old job back or correct Brent's narrative. I was going to rewrite my own. By morning, I had scheduled a meeting with an attorney I trusted from my San Francisco days. I reached out to 2 former clients with a single-line message copy. Next week, I didn't explain why. I didn't need to. The silence I'd kept all these years, all those back-channel compromises and corporate diplomacy had finally cracked. They thought they'd pushed me aside. What they didn't know was that they'd freed me, and I wasn't planning on wasting that freedom. Not this time, not on anyone else's terms. Apex East Consulting was registered in Delaware on a Tuesday at 9:42 a.m. The paperwork was clean. The name had been sitting in a draft folder for months, waiting for a reason. There was no LinkedIn post, no launch announcement, no picture of a laptop with a coffee captioned "First Day of Freedom." I didn't even tell my sister. The brand identity was minimal by design. Just a black and white logo, a domain name with no SEO, and a one-page site that said, strategy, culture, precision. I built the business the same way I'd built everything else in my career, quietly and deliberately. No noise, no show, just substance. I sent exactly 5 emails that first week. Each one was no more than 3 sentences. Each one went to someone I'd worked with directly who had sat across from me in late-night negotiation rooms, seen me walk out of client dinners at midnight without missing a beat. The subject line was always the same. Available for a quick chat. I didn't need to sell them. I just reminded them I still existed. The first reply came in 12 minutes. The next is under an hour. By the end of the week, I had 3 meetings scheduled across 2 time zones. No one asked what happened at HelixCore. They didn't have to. They'd seen the signs, missed emails, slower response times, a new name popping into threads they used to count on me for. I used a burner laptop for sensitive files, no cloud sync, no auto backups. I didn't want anyone tracing traffic or spotting patterns. Everything I sent was watermarked, encrypted, and temporary. I operated like a ghost, not because I had something to hide, but because I knew who was watching. HelixCore didn't notice at first. Brent was too busy celebrating what he thought was a power play. He didn't track the subtle shifts, the rescheduled calls, the dropped meetings, the partners who suddenly needed more time. But I saw it happening, one quiet ripple at a time. I had no interest in headlines, no lawsuits, no tell-alls, just results. My strategy was simple. Move, low, strike sharp, leave no trace. Apex East wasn't a rebellion. It was a correction, a recalibration of what happens when the wrong people think they're untouchable. I wasn't burning bridges. I was building my own. And I knew exactly which direction they were headed. The first client went quiet. Not a dramatic breakup, no official notice. Just a missed check-in, then a postponed quarterly review, then nothing at all. Brent didn't notice. He chalked it up to time zones or year-end fatigue. I didn't say a word. The second client rescheduled a kickoff 3 times. When the new project lead asked if they'd received the updated scope, they replied they were reevaluating internal priorities. Brent sent a follow-up with buzzwords and bullet points. He didn't get a response. By the time the third client declined to renew their contract, Brent started asking questions. Not publicly. Just the kind of corporate whispers disguised as calendar invites marked alignment sync. I wasn't in those meetings, but I knew the tone. I'd sat in enough to recognize what silence really meant. I never reached out directly. I never asked anyone to leave HelixCore. That would have been messy. And I didn't need to. The clients weren't confused. They saw the shift the moment I disappeared from the thread. They understood when the calls got louder, but said less. When culture was replaced with pressure. When Brent started sending files with the wrong titles, mixing up names, and offering translation support that felt like a bad machine output. I didn't sell Apex East. I answered emails. I listened. I offered solutions that actually understood the context, not just what they needed. But how did they work? What mattered to them? What deadlines weren't flexible and what phrases should be avoided in a final proposal. Meanwhile, Brent called an all-hands with APAC sales fumbling through a slideshow labeled Account Retention, a Path Forward. He paced, he sweated, he blamed market volatility and remote workflows. He asked for aggressive re-engagement and fresh outreach. No one mentioned my name. They didn't have to. One by one, the clients followed the same path. A polite exit, a vague reason, then a quiet message to me. Not all of them, just the ones that mattered. The ones who'd been there when the real work happened. I didn't gloat. I didn't screenshot. I just moved. Put together scopes. Hired 2 remote assistants. Switched to secure billing platforms. And kept going. No noise, no press, just motion. Brent was left chasing shadows, trying to fix relationships he'd never bothered to build. He thought clients were assets. I knew they were people. That was the difference. That's why they chose me. Brent tried to play tough. He walked into legal like a man with a mission waving screenshots and half-baked claims about intellectual property theft. He called it sabotage. Said I was breaching confidentiality. Said I'd poached clients. He wanted an injunction. He wanted me shut down. But legal wasn't impressed. They started digging, pulled my file, scanned the HR exit logs, checked the documents for a signed non-compete and NDA, anything enforceable. And what they found was a whole lot of nothing. No final paperwork, no signed separation agreement, no restrictions. Just a termination email that Brent had sent in a rush, without copying legal, without processing through compliance. A digital shrug that had removed my access, but left every legal door wide open. I hadn't even needed to dig. I already had the receipts. A chain of emails to HR dated a month before the blow-up. I had asked for updated contract terms after a title change. I'd followed up twice, once in writing, once over Slack. I'd been ignored both times. The cherry on top. An email from Brent himself 2 days before the Tokyo meeting. He told HR not to waste legal's time. Said he'd handle my exit personally. Efficiency, he called it. Their oversight. My weapon. Legal stared at the printouts in silence. Brent went pale, tried to pivot, tried to blame someone else. But it was too late. I had never signed anything. I owed them nothing. And they knew it. Everything I was doing was legal, smart, clean, within my rights. They couldn't touch me. Not because I was lucky, but because I'd seen it coming and prepared. Brent thought he'd cut me loose. In reality, he'd set me free. No leash, no paperwork, no way to stop what came next. And I think somewhere deep down, that was the part that stung him most. The offer came through an encrypted email. A settlement in the high 6 figures. No admission of wrongdoing. Just a tidy payout in exchange for silence. Walk away quietly, they said. Sign the NDA, agree to stay out of the press and let the dust settle. I didn't even hesitate. I declined with 2 sentences. I'm not looking for money. I'm looking for the truth to be named. There was a pause after that. A long one. Then the headlines started rolling. Quiet at first. An anonymous source mentioned leadership instability at HelixCore. A business columnist hinted at client churn in the Asia-Pacific region. Then someone leaked the internal email chain, and the story snapped into focus. Apex East wasn't named directly, not yet. But insiders knew. When my new IP address pinged old servers. When my name showed up on invite lists for strategic forums that used to be dominated by HelixCore. When project managers realized their clients were now forwarding inquiries to me, the stock took its first hit on a Monday. Just under 4%. Then 7 by Thursday. By the following week, it had dropped 12. Shareholders started asking questions. The board called emergency meetings. Brent tried to spin it as market volatility, but no one believed that anymore. Meanwhile, I worked. I signed a long-term logistics overhaul for a Korean firm I'd first met 3 years ago over cold sake and crab legs. A German client offered equity in exchange for strategic restructuring. The Tokyo partner he signed a 10-year contract with Apex East. No middlemen, full control. There were no announcements, no press photos, just results. What I felt wasn't revenge. It was balanced. Like a wrong had finally been accounted for. I didn't want to destroy HelixCore. I wanted the system that protected people like Brent to be seen for what it was. Hollow, fragile, built on noise, not substance. I never raised my voice. I never leaked anything. All I did was refuse to disappear. And somehow that was enough to bring the whole illusion down. Apex East didn't rise from anger. It rose from clarity, from knowing what I'd built could never be taken again because it was mine this time. Mine by choice. Mine by proof. And that was all I ever really wanted. The light shifted across the glass as the sun began its slow descent behind the skyline. From the 27th floor, Chicago looked softened at this hour. The windows caught every reflection of movement below, but in here, everything was still. I sat at the head of a table that belonged to no one but me. No branding, no logo on the wall, no plaque with someone else's name. Just clean wood, silent confidence, and the deal in front of me. The numbers were 3 times what HelixCore had once projected. Same client, same region, different outcome. I didn't call a photographer. I didn't draft a press release. There was no audience, no announcement, no staged handshake, just the sound of paper turning and the calm click of a pen as I signed. Across from me sat the man who had once asked if I would ever build something of my own. He didn't smile. He didn't need to. We both knew what this moment meant. Not a victory lap. Not a comeback. Just a shift in weight. The right person finally holding the pen. I pushed the contract forward with steady hands. My assistant waited outside, not because I needed help, but because I had finally built a place where things moved at my pace. Nothing rushed, nothing reactive, only what mattered. There were no PR teams crafting spin, no board members to clear language with, no exit clauses hanging over my shoulder. I didn't have to worry about who would get credit, who would rewrite the story in the hallway outside the conference room. This time it was my name on the agreement. My strategy, my terms. As the client stood to leave, we exchanged a quiet nod. No words were needed. Trust like that doesn't require explanation. It's earned in the silence between sentences, in the details no one else bothers to get right. After they left, I stayed. The room was warm from the late light. My reflection in the glass looked different from what it used to. Not older, just settled. Like someone who had stopped trying to prove anything and started choosing everything. I opened my laptop not to post, not to scroll, just to look at the calendar. My next meeting was already scheduled. Another partner, another expansion. The work kept moving, but now it moved through me. Every part of this journey had taught me something. About timing, about leverage, about silence. But more than anything about control. How to take it. How to hold it. How to keep it quiet. They had tried to erase me in a boardroom. Now I wrote the terms behind closed doors with the confidence of someone who had already survived the worst kind of erasure. The kind that pretends your value is optional, disposable, replaceable. I was none of those things. I was at the table. I was in the room. And now I was the one deciding who got a seat.